I have examined my desk and seen that nothing good can be done on it. It is midnight. The burning electric light, the silent house, the darkness outside, they give me the right to write, even if it be only the most miserable stuff. And this right I use hurriedly. That's the person I am. I feel restless and vicious. I have now a great yearning to write all my anxiety entirely out of me. I stare rigidly ahead, lest my eyes lose the imaginary peepholes of the imaginary kaleidoscope into which I am looking. I invite heaven and earth to take part in my scheme. And what is my scheme? To observe myself. This inescapable duty to observe oneself. But most of these observations are no more than lies. We often ask, who has been telling lies about us? Who could have said such things? Someone must have been telling lies about Joseph K. For without having done anything wrong, he was arrested one fine morning. His landlady's cook, who always brought him his breakfast at 8 o'clock, failed to appear on this occasion. That had never happened before.
Who are you?
Did you ring?
Anna's to bring me my breakfast.
He says Anna is to bring him his breakfast. I think you'd better stay here.
What are you doing here? Where's Anna? Where's my breakfast? I'm going to see Frau Grubeck to see what she has to say about this.
No. You can't go out. You are under arrest.
But what for?
We're not authorized to tell you. Proceedings have been instituted against you. You'll be informed of everything in due course. I'm exceeding my instructions in speaking freely to you like this. But if you continue to have as good luck as you've had in the choice of your warders, then you can be confident of the final result.
You'll soon discover that we're telling you the truth.
Why didn't she come in?
She's allowed to.
Since you're under arrest.
So how can I be under arrest? And particularly in such a ridiculous fashion.
I told you, we don't answer such questions.
Yes? Well, you'll have to answer them. Here are my papers. Now show me yours. Where's your warrant for arresting me?
What are your papers to us? You're behaving worse than a child. Do you think you'll bring this fine case of yours to a speedier end by wrangling with us, your warders, over papers and warrants?
We are humble subordinates who have nothing to do with your case except to stand guard over you for 10 hours a day and draw our pay for it. That's all we are. But we're quite capable of grasping the fact that the high authorities we serve, before they order such an arrest as this, must be quite well informed about the reasons for the arrest and the person and the prisoner. There can be no mistake about that.
See, our officials are drawn towards the guilty and send out as warders. That is the law. How could there be a mistake in that?
I don't know this law.
All the worse for you.
Probably exists only in your own head.
Well, you come up against it yet? See, Willem, he admits he doesn't know the law, and yet he claims he's innocent.
You're quite right, but you never make a man like that see reason.
The inspector wants you.
Joseph K. You are presumably very surprised at the events of this morning.
Certainly I am surprised. But not very surprised.
Not very surprised?
I mean that when one has lived in the world for 30 years and had to fight one's way through it, as I have had to do, one becomes hardened to its surprises. Doesn't take them too seriously. Particularly this one.
Why particularly this one?
Well, I won't say I regard the whole thing as a joke. For the preparations that have been made seem too elaborate for that.
Quite right.
But on the other hand, it can't be a matter of great importance either. I can't think of one offence which could be charged against me. But even this is of minor importance. Now, the real question here is, who accuses me? Are you officers of the law? None of you wears a uniform, unless your suit is to be regarded as a uniform, but it's more like a tourist's outfit. I demand a clear answer to these questions, and I feel certain that after an explanation we shall be able to part from each other on the best of terms.
How simple it all seems to you. You want to settle the matter amicably, do you? No, that really can't be done. On the other hand, I don't mean to suggest that you should give up hope. Why should you? You are only under arrest, nothing more. I was requested to inform you of this. I've done so. And I have also observed your reactions. That's enough for today, and we can say goodbye. Though only for the time being, naturally. You'll be wanting to go to work now, I suppose.
To work? But I'm under arrest. How can I go to work if I'm under arrest?
Ah, I see. You have misunderstood me. You are under arrest, certainly, but that need not hinder you from going about your business. You won't be hampered in carrying on in the ordinary course of your life.
Then being arrested is not such a bad thing.
I never suggested it was.
Then there would seem no particular necessity to tell me about it.
It was my duty.
We've just seen the opening of Kafka's novel, The Trial, and this may be the most famous single moment in all of modern literature. The morning knock at the door. The morning knock at the door which begins the process of labyrinthine terror, of haunting menace throughout the whole of the novel. Now that knock at the morning door can come from the secret police in Russia, South Africa, Central America. It can also take much less melodramatic forms. It stands for what lies in ambush for all of us in our daily, banal, common lives. The wait in the hospital ward, the mountains of tax forms, the visas waited for in vain in the corridor, in the consular office. That bureaucracy of terror, of grinding banality, which characterizes so much of our 20th century, and which Kafka is precisely the one to have defined, and for which he has given us the key passwords. The English poet W.H. Auden said, had one to name the author, who comes nearest to bearing the same kind of relation to our age as Dante, Shakespeare, and Goethe bore to theirs, Kafka is the first one would think of. And indeed, in more than 100 languages, we now have that word Kafkaesque, the name of Kafka used as an adjective, including, in fact, in Japanese, to characterize the dark world which he created. And yet, the man who did this, who changed the inner landscape of our self-consciousness, was a fantastically shy, very sick Jew living in Prague, who published in his lifetime only fragments, a very few stories, and 1 or 2 chapters from unpublished, wholly private manuscripts of novels, and who died young in 1924.
When Franz Kafka died at the age of 41, his work was known only to a tiny handful of readers in his native city of Prague. He lived there, reluctantly, for most of his short life. Prague does not let go, either of you or of me. The little mother has claws, he wrote. There is nothing for it but to give in. Few of his novels or stories ever satisfied him, and he even, famously, requested that on his death all his work should be destroyed. Although Kafka rarely mentions it specifically, the landscape of Prague underlies everything he wrote. The city is dominated by a huge castle, which, as in Kafka's novel of that name, rises above a warren of labyrinthine streets. To him, Prague was an alien place, yet its world of alleys and corridors is one he made resonant of our whole century. In the years before the First World War, it was a dynamic yet provincial city. Prague at that time contained one of the largest Jewish populations in Central Europe, and it was into this community, with its rich traditions, that Kafka was born. Czechoslovakia was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and consequently, German was the official and dominant language. Kafka's family were German-speaking Jews, successful businessmen, who lived in what is known as the Old Town, the age-old Jewish quarter of the city. Yet Kafka grew up with little sense of rootedness. He felt alienated, firstly as a Jew at a time of rising anti-Semitism, and secondly as a German speaker in a predominantly Czech nation.
For 2 days, I have noticed an inner coolness and indifference. Yesterday evening, during my walk, every little street sound, every eye turned towards me, was more important to me than myself. Many years ago, I went over the wishes that I wanted to realize in life. I found that the most important and the most delightful was the wish to attain a view of life and to convince others of it in writing, in which life, while still retaining its full-bodied rise and fall, would simultaneously be recognized no less clearly as a nothing, a dream, a dim hovering, a beautiful whiff, perhaps, if I had wished it rightly.
Kafka etches his sentences like do the great glass engravers of Prague with those diamond-hard points. He writes in a way that seems to us out of a dream world. We ask, where is it all from? And then we suddenly realize it is also profoundly realistic. The sleepwalker's world of terror and bureaucracy, which Kafka describes, can be seen as a marvelously realistic, almost photographic portrait of the late Austro-Hungarian Empire, of the collapse of that empire, under mountains, Everests of paperwork, of chicanery, of small-time bureaucrats. And at the same time, his most hallucinatory, his most clairvoyant and prophetic discoveries turn out to be the grimmest reportage, but reportage before the facts. In his famous story, The Metamorphosis, the man changed into a bug, the name for vermin, which he chooses from several possible German words, Ungeziefer, was to become the exact name given by the Nazis to those whom they exterminated 30 years later. In fact, Kafka, whenever he writes a single word, seems to have borrowed it from a bank which charges absolutely exorbitant interest on every word that the writer borrows. And he hurries away, knowing that he must try and bring it back intact by nightfall.
One morning, while he was working in the bank, Kay was informed by telephone that next Sunday a short inquiry into his case would take place. Sunday had been selected so that he might not be disturbed in his professional work. It was, of course, understood that he must appear without fail. He did not need to be reminded of that.
go through. Just go right through. I must shut the doors after you. Nobody else must come in.
You should have been here an hour and 5 minutes ago.
Whether I am late or not, I'm here now.
Yes, but I'm no longer obliged to hear you now. Yet I shall make an exception for once on this occasion, but such a delay must not occur again. Now step forward. Well then, you are a house painter.
No. I'm junior manager in a large bank. This question of yours, Herr Examining Magistrate, about my being a house painter, or rather not a question, you simply made a statement, is typical of the whole character of this trial which is being foisted on me. What has happened to me is only a single instance of a misguided policy which is being directed against many other people as well. All I desire is a public ventilation of a grievance. Some 10 days ago, I was arrested in a manner which seems ridiculous to me. I was seized in my bed by two coarse warders, degenerate ruffians who brazenly ate my breakfast before my eyes. It was difficult for me to remain calm. Now, there is no doubt that behind all the actions of this court of justice, there is a great organization at work. And the significance of this great organization, it consists in this, that innocent persons are accused of guilt, and senseless proceedings put in motion against them, mostly without effect. It is true, as of my case. I have nearly finished. All I would say in conclusion is this: that you postpone until later any comments you may wish to exchange on what I have had to say, because I am pressed for time. I must leave you now. I wish you the joy of your trade.
Just one moment. Before you leave, I would just like to say that today, you may not yet have become aware of the fact, today you have flung away with your own hand all the advantages which an interrogation invariably confers on an accused man.
How was he to conduct his case from a bank office? While his case was unfolding itself, while up in the attics the court clerks were poring over charge papers, was he to devote his attention to the affairs of the bank? Would he ever find the right path through all these difficulties? What days were lying in wait for him?
By day, like his character, K, Kafka worked in one of Prague's many offices, the Workmen's Accident Insurance Institute, processing claims placed by victims of industrial injury. It's easy to see in its labyrinth of corridors and stairways a model for the bureaucratic nightmares of his novels. But Kafka did not work to find source material for his books. To him, it was just another impediment to his true vocation, the nighttime world of his writing.
This back and forth is getting worse all the time. At the office, I live up to my outward duties, but not to the inner duties. And those unfulfilled duties grow into a permanent torment. Those are the seductive voices of the night. The sirens, too, sound that way. It would be doing them an injustice to think that they wanted to seduce. They knew they had claws and sterile wounds, and they lamented aloud. They could not help it if their lament sounded so beautiful.
It is Franz Kafka's supreme genius to universalize. That means quite simply to make compelling, real, utterly obvious to all of us circumstances which were in actual fact extremely private, extremely secret and personal. I'm thinking not only of his illness, an illness which he cultivated and made the safeguard of his genius, of his writing, of the time he needed. I'm thinking not only of the almost fantastic diffidence he showed in practical life, though it turns out that he was an extremely honest, efficient, and conscientious insurance assessor. I think above all of the quarrel which determined the whole of his art and vision of himself, that with his father, with the looming, mountainous, elephantine figure of that father who crushes him, who tears the guts out of him by saying, an adult man, and particularly a young Jew, marries, has an honest and successful career, and founds a family. What kind of a nonentity, of a coward, of a betrayer of Judaism and of humanity is the bachelor, the vanishing sick bachelor, the shadow figure of his son? Now, psychoanalysis has an enormous lot to tell us about that. It feeds on Kafka, but it feeds very inadequately. What is at stake is something much, much older and more powerful and more universal than the Oedipus complex. It is the relationship not only to the Father, but to God the Father. In a paternalistic universe, in a universe of crushing, emasculating power relations, in which, in the eternal, irrevocable battle between father and son, the son is always guilty.
There is only one episode in the early years of which I have a direct memory. You may remember it too. Once, in the night, I kept on whimpering for water. After several vigorous threats had failed to have any effect, you took me out of bed, carried me to the balcony, and left me there alone for a while in my nightshirt, outside the shut door. I dare say I was quite obedient afterwards at that period, but it did me inner harm. Even years afterwards, I suffered from the tormenting fancy that a huge man, my father, the ultimate authority, could come almost for no reason at all and take me out of bed in the night.
Kafka's relationship to his father is considered by many to be the wellspring of much of his writing. His father, Hermann, was contemptuous of his son's literary ambitions, but more importantly, represented everything Franz was not. Hermann was strong, while his son was sickly, successful and confident in life, whereas Franz was shy and gauche, married, while he remained a sad bachelor. Hermann Kafka never hid his disappointment from his son, and as a consequence, figures of authority pervade his writing, as do themes of chastisement. In the Penal Colony, a short novel, is about a machine that punishes offenders by cutting the name of their crime into their flesh like a ghastly parody of the printing press. And in The Trial, one of the most powerful scenes occurs when, in the bank, Kay hears noises coming from what he'd always taken to be a lumber room.
What are you doing here?
Sir, we are to be flogged because you complained about us to the examining magistrate.
I never complained. I just said what happened in my rooms.
We're only being punished because you accused us. If you hadn't, nothing would have happened, even if they discovered what we did. We call that justice.
Is there any way of getting these two off their flogging? I'll reward you well if you let them go.
So, do you want to lay a complaint against me too? And get me a whipping as well?
If I wanted these men punished, I wouldn't be trying to buy you off now. It's not them that I blame, it's the organisation that's to blame, the high officials. If it was one of the judges that you were flogging, I'd reward you well to encourage you in your good work.
No! I won't be bribed. I'm here to whip people. And whip them I shall. I can't wait any longer.
It's only me.
Good evening, Herr Assessor. Has anything happened?
No. Just a dog howling in the courtyard. You can go back to work.
Sir!
Open the door. I'm a friend of the Herr Advocate.
The Herr Advocate is ill.
Open the door. I must speak to the Herr Advocate.
He is ill.
Is it his heart?
I think so. But he cannot see anyone. He says he's a friend of yours, a Joseph Kay.
Oh, Joseph. Let him in.
Are you really ill? I can't believe it. It's one of your heart attacks that'll pass over like all the others.
Maybe. But it's worse than it's ever been before.
You see that my master is ill.
As the trial progresses, Joseph Kay, the resolution of his case still no nearer, attempts to take matters into his own hands.
You go now, Lenny.
The whole of the second half of the novel consists of various encounters Kay has with people who've some knowledge of the workings of the court, but they do little to enlighten him. His first step is to consult an advocate.
I want you.
Well, I suppose you're here about your case.
Yes. But how did you hear?
Oh, nothing stays secret for long when one's involved with the courts. But I must warn you, there are many times when the first plea is not heard by the court at all. They simply file it. If this happens, we must prepare a second plea and so on, until the court agrees to take up the case. Don't forget, either, that the proceedings of the court are not public. They could, if the court considered it necessary, become public, but the law does not prescribe that they must be made public. Naturally, therefore, the legal records of the case, and above all, the charge sheets, are inaccessible to the accused and to his counsel. Consequently, one does not know with any precision what charges are to be met. So, the first plea is always a rather general one. Only later can any genuinely effective and convincing pleas be drawn up. In these circumstances, the defense is in a very ticklish and difficult position. And there are differences of opinion, even on that point. Is Lenny pestering you?
Pestering me?
Yes. I suppose you can't help noticing that she is pestering you. Well, don't let it bother you. It's a peculiarity of hers. I have long forgiven her. It doesn't surprise me as much as it seems to surprise you. If you have the right eye for these things, you can see that accused men are often attractive. It's a remarkable phenomenon, almost a natural law. But those who are experienced in such matters can pick out, one after another, all the accused men in the largest of crowds. How do they know them? It can't be a sense of guilt that makes them attractive, for it behoves me to say this as an advocate at least. They can't all be guilty. And it can't be the justice of the penance laid on them that makes them attractive in anticipation. For they aren't all going to be punished. So, it must be the mere charge preferred against them that in some way enhances their attraction. Of course, some are much more attractive than others, but they're all attractive, even the wretched ones.
I'll just go and see what happened.
Nothing has happened. I simply flung a plate against the wall to bring you out.
I was thinking of you.
Come this way. In here. I thought you would come. You couldn't keep your eyes off me from the moment you arrived. And yet you leave me to wait.
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm really rather shy, and I didn't think you were to be had for the first time of asking.
You didn't like me. And you probably don't like me now.
Liking is a feeble word. That's probably my judge.
I know him. He often comes here. But that picture's not like him. He's a small man, almost a dwarf. But he had himself painted like that. He's madly vain, like everybody else here. But I'm vain too. And it upsets me you don't like me in the least. You brood too much over your case.
I probably brewed too little.
That isn't the mistake you make. You're too unyielding. That's what I've heard.
Who told you that?
Don't ask me for names. Take my warning to heart instead. You can't resist the court. You must admit your fault. Do you have a sweetheart?
No. Oh, yes, just imagine. I told you I didn't have one, but I have a photograph of her here. In my wallet.
She's very tight-laced. You wouldn't miss her very much if you were to lose her. Or exchange her for somebody else. Me, for instance. she any physical defect?
Physical defect?
Yes, I have one. Look.
One of the great sadnesses of Kafka's life was his inability to form adult relationships with women. Although he was always close to his mother and 3 sisters, particularly the youngest, Ottla, he was unable to find the emotional commitment to marry. He was engaged twice in his life and had several love affairs. The most important were with Felicia Bauer, whom he met in 1912, and 8 years later with Milena Jasenka. With both women, he built up a massive correspondence, but would always break off a relationship when love came too close.
When we try to get a hold of a presence, of a persona, as elusive, as singular as Franz Kafka's, we've got to be terribly careful. We're almost certainly going to get it wrong and to make it vulgar. One often forgets that in his novels and stories, sexuality is extremely powerful. In fact, sometimes very gross and almost sadistic. Men and women couple like hungry animals. The world of the prostitute, the underworld of the servant girl, at the bidding of money and power, are tremendously present in Kafka's work. In his own personal life, the relationship to women was one of endless self-reproach and agony. To his fiancée, Felicia Bauer, he writes, "I very much want to marry you. I'm totally incapable of doing so, so my desire is itself simply a proof of my guilt and of how wrong I am to want it." With Milena Jasenka, a woman of exceptional gifts, perhaps one radiant present in his life, when her love comes too near to him, Kafka himself retreats, runs away, sensing, perhaps subconsciously, that a life like his own cannot be shared. It is only at the very end of that life, when he's dying of tuberculosis, when his throat is, as he tells us, being gnawed inch by inch by a secret little animal from within, it is only then that with a young woman, Dora Dimant, whom he met through his interest in Zionism, Kafka seems to find a hint of peace, a hint of acceptance. And he does so when he's already very nearly on the other side of death.
It seems so dreadful to be a bachelor, to become an old man, struggling to keep one's dignity while begging for an invitation whenever one wants to spend an evening in company, never being able to run up a stairway beside one's wife. The farther one moves away from the living, so much the smaller space is considered necessary for him. This bachelor, still in the midst of life, apparently of his own free will, resigns himself to an ever smaller space, and when he dies, the coffin is exactly right for him.
These brats! I painted one of them once, and ever since then they've all persecuted me.
Titrelli! Can I come in now?
No!
Not even me!
Not even you! So you want to find out something about the court? Are you innocent?
Yes, I'm completely innocent.
Well, if you're innocent, then the matter is quite simple.
My innocence doesn't seem to make the matter any simpler. I still have to fight against the countless subtleties in which the court is prone to lose itself, and in the end, out of nothing at all, an enormous fabric of guilt can be conjured up.
Yes, of course, but you're innocent all the same. Well, that's the main thing.
You know the courts much better than I feel certain, but one thing seems clear to me. That the courts, once they have brought a charge against the person, are firmly convinced of the guilt of the accused and can be dislodged from that conviction only with the greatest of difficulty.
The greatest of difficulty? Never! In any case can the court be dislodged from that conviction.
I see.
Seems to me that you've got very little general idea of the court yet. But since you're innocent, you won't need it anyhow. I shall get you off all by myself.
Well, how can you do that? You told me yourself just a few minutes ago the court was quite impervious to proof.
Impervious only to the proof which one brings before the court. But it is quite a different matter in one's efforts behind the scenes, in the consulting room, in the lobbies, or, for example, here, in this very studio. Because they all come here, you know.
Titrelli!
Every judge insists on being painted, and nobody can do that but me. Now, what kind of acquittal do you want? There are three possibilities. There is definite acquittal, ostensible acquittal, and indefinite postponement. Do you understand? I've never encountered one case of definite acquittal.
But one case of definite acquittal. Well, that merely confirms the opinion I've formed of this court. It's a senseless institution from any point of view. A single executioner could do all that's needed.
Let us leave definite acquittal out of the character. There are the other possibilities. Ostensible acquittal and indefinite postponement.
Titrelli, don't you go to Wednesday?
Quiet there. Can't you see that I'm engaged with this gentleman?
Are you going to paint me? Please don't paint such an ugly man as that.
Stop that noise, otherwise I'll fling you down the stairs. Oh, excuse me. These girls belong to the court, too.
What?
Oh, you see, everything belongs to the court.
That's something I hadn't noticed.
You don't have any general idea of the court yet, do you? But won't you take your jacket off? You look very hot.
It's unbearable in here. Could you open a window?
No, it can't open.
Well, that's both uncomfortable and unhealthy.
Not really. No, the air comes in everywhere through the chinks, anyway. Now, to get back. First of all, ostensible acquittal. If you decide on that, I shall write down on a piece of paper an affidavit of your innocence. Then with this affidavit, I shall make a round of the judges that I know and explain your innocence. If a sufficient number of judges subscribe to the affidavit, I shall then deliver it to the judge who is actually conducting your trial. Possibly I may even have secured his signature, in which case everything will be settled fairly soon. Sooner than usual. And then you can walk out of the court a free man.
So then I am free.
Ostensibly free. But these judges don't have the power to grant a final acquittal. Well, that power is reserved for the highest court of all, which is inaccessible to you, or to me, or to all of us. Now, would you like me to explain how postponement works? Well, postponement consists in preventing the case from ever getting past the first stages. So, as a matter of form, from time to time, various activity has to take place. Certain measures have to be taken. The accused is questioned, evidence is collected, and so on, for the case must be kept going all the time. Both methods have this in common, that they save the accused from coming up for sentence.
But they also prevent actual acquittal.
You have grasped the kernel of the matter. But don't make up your mind too soon. You have to weigh everything up very carefully. On the other hand, you mustn't take too long about it either.
I'll come back again soon.
Make sure you keep to your word, otherwise I'll have to come to the bank and make inquiries for myself.
Unlock this door.
Take the other door out. It's better if you don't want to be seen by too many people. Yes, you can come this way. Don't be afraid to step at the bed. Everybody who comes here has to do that.
What's this?
What are you surprised at? It's a law court. There are law court offices in every attic. Why should this be an exception?
The nightmare strangeness and the surrealistic quality of the events throughout the novel lie at the heart of Kafka's sense that we are all on trial. We are all under prosecution. Now, what kind of a trial is this? The roots of that idea lie deep in Judaism. There is a judgment, a tribunal, and the law, the sacred, the supreme law. And it's catch-22. If we don't know the law, we're obviously guilty. If we know it and can't observe its innumerable, tiny, detailed, yet ferociously logical prescriptions, we are guilty also. In fact, for Kafka to be alive is to be on a kind of probation, on a very direct probation in front of a tribunal, which we can neither fully understand nor influence. Of all the myths and parables which he, and I don't know what word to use, which he found within the heart of truth, the most famous is that which he wrote in 1914, published separately in 1916, and then set at the very center of the novel, The Trial, the parable of the law, before the law, for them gazettes. It's only a page in length, or a page and a few lines, and yet, perfectly seriously, one can set it next to the immensity of the Book of Job. It shares with the Book of Job that quality of demanding inexhaustibility. Kafka said that a myth begins in a place of truth and ends in a place of inexplicability. This is Kafka's exact path, and the path of Joseph K. as he approaches the cathedral in which the unfathomable yet translucent legend of the law and the doorkeeper is going to be communicated to him.
Joseph K. Are you Joseph K?
Yes.
You are the accused man.
So I've been informed.
Then you are the man I seek. I am the prison chaplain.
Indeed.
I had you summoned here to have a talk with you. Do you know that your case is going badly?
I have that idea myself, yes.
How do you think it will end?
I do not know how it will end. Do you?
No, but I fear it will end badly. You are held to be guilty. Your case may never perhaps get beyond a lower court.
But I am not guilty. It's a misunderstanding. And if it comes to that, how can any man be called guilty? We're all simply men here, one as much as the other.
That is true. But that is how all guilty men talk. What is the next step you propose to take in the matter?
I'm going to seek some more help. There are several possibilities I haven't investigated yet.
You cast about too much for outside help.
Have you a little time for me?
As much time as you need.
You are the exception to those who belong to the court. I have more trust in you than any of the others, though I know many of them. I feel I can speak openly to you.
Don't be deluded.
How am I being deluded?
You are deluding yourself about the court. In the scriptures that preface the law, that particular delusion is described thus. Before the law stands a doorkeeper on guard. To this doorkeeper comes a man from the country who begs admittance to the law. But the doorkeeper says that he cannot admit the man at the moment. The man, on reflection, asks if we will allow then to enter later. It is possible, answers the doorkeeper, but not at this moment. The doorkeeper gives him a stool and lets him sit down at the side of the door. There he sits waiting for days and years. In the first years, he curses his evil fate aloud. Later, as he grows older, he only mutters to himself. He grows old. Now his life is drawing to a close. Before he dies, all that he's experienced during the whole time of his sojourn condenses in his mind into to one question which he has never yet put to the doorkeeper. He beckons the doorkeeper, since he can no longer raise his stiffening body. "What is it you want to know now?" asks the doorkeeper. "Everyone strives to attain the law," says the man. "How is it then that in all these years no one has come seeking admission but me?" The doorkeeper sees the man is at the end of his strength and his hearing is failing. So he bellows in his ear, "No one but you could gain admittance through this door, since this door was intended for no one but you. I am now going to shut it." That is the story in the very words of the scriptures. The court makes no claims on you. It receives you when you come, and it relinquishes you when you go.
This story I wrote at one sitting, from 10 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning. I was hardly able to pull my legs out from under the desk. They had got so stiff from sitting. Several times during the night, I heaved my own weight upon my back. How everything can be said. How for the strangest fancies there waits a great fire in which they perish and rise up again. How it turned blue outside the window. On the evening before Kay's 31st birthday, it was about 9 o'clock, the time when a hush falls on the streets. 2 men came to his lodgings.
Come in. So you were appointed for me?
10th-rate actors they send for me.
I'm ready. Let us go.
Kay now perceived clearly that he was supposed to seize the knife himself and plunge it into his own breast. But he did not do so. He merely gazed around him. His glance fell on the top story of the house which adjoins the quarry. Who was it? A friend? Someone who wanted to help? Where was the judge whom he had never seen? Where was the high court which he had never penetrated? He raised his hand and spread out all his fingers. But the hands of one of the partners were already at Kay's throat. With failing eyes, he could still see the 2 of them, watching the final act. Like a dog, he said. It was as if he meant the shame of it to outlive him.
The last word is shame, but it is not that shame which has outlived Franz Kafka. On the contrary, it has been the dark radiance of his work, and I'd like to go further than that, the almost impenetrable purity of the man's presence. He has made it just that little bit harder for every one of us to write, even to speak after him. And those writings which he instructed his intimate friend Max Brod to destroy at his death now fill the imaginations of the civilized world. They were banned and incinerated by the Nazis in 1933. And Kafka's sisters and his beloved Milena were to die in Auschwitz. And Kafka's books, however, have survived and are now fully alive in every part of the globe. Oh yes, they're unavailable in Prague. There, Kafka is a kind of embarrassing spectre. This wouldn't have surprised him one bit. In fact, it's what Kafka is about. It's fully inherent in his vision of man without justice, without a roof on this earth. In a very brief moment of self-confidence, God knows he didn't have many, Kafka said that once, I think it was on a hotel ledger or in his diary, he took his pen and wrote the letter K, K. And he said, perhaps this letter will belong to me. In fact, it does. For almost all of us today, K is Kafka. As, for example, S is not Shakespeare. And I can think of no other figure in the history of literature or of thought who has made his own a letter of the alphabet.